evening and welcome once again to Gaming Under the Influence. I'm Mike here with Alex, coming from GreenDragonCVR in Woodbridge to talk about video games. How are you, pal?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good, man. How are you?
I'm doing well also.
Oh, yeah.
Enjoying a couple of JRPGs still. Wild Arms 3 and Persona 4 Golden, about 40 hours into each. Hopefully coming to the end soon.
Yeah, I mean, you've been playing pretty much equally them at the same time, right?
Yeah,
so naturally, yeah, that's going to take some time.
I expect to finish by the end of this month in time for first Berserker Khazan, which we just played a little bit of before we got into recording this,
that's
didn't we?
Right.
And how'd you feel about that game so far?
It looks, I want to say I'm still a little bit optimistic about it, given that it's, a new entry in Souls genre, but I am a little bit apprehensive, I will say, about it.
Me too.
Not too, I think, as thrilled about some of the things. It's still early and we've only played like half an hour, like you said, but
yeah, I think it's easy to say that while it certainly didn't have any outright negative elements, nothing off-putting off the bat, it seems not to have anything that stands out to me.
Yeah, slightly drab, I guess, right? It reminded me of Lords of the Fallen.
I think that's an apt comparison, and all this, it touches on a deeper idea, which is that one of our most beloved genres that we've talked about since its inception and popularization, being the Souls-like genre, seems to have finally become somewhat standardized, wouldn't you say?
Standardized, mainstream, let's say.
In recent years, standardization has become prevalent in the sense that now between, AAA studios who in the first place are making these kinds of games at all.
Yep.
They're starting to be like persistent aesthetic and mechanical tropes that appear across the games. And I think that while this can often be a good thing, we talked in the past about how there's like genre grammars that developers can use to express their ideas and this and that. I think it can be good that there's a codification of mechanics within a genre, but the important thing is that the developer working in that genre still has something interesting to express with those mechanics.
Yeah, if it allows for them the freedom to show off their creativity and stuff like that, then it's a good thing. But
yeah, they got to have something to fill the words with. So you know what I mean?
In the absence of that uniqueness or creativity, you get kind of drabby, just run of the mill.
Yeah, generic looking medieval fantasy.
Yeah,
and first Berserker Khazan, from my understanding, it's set in something called the Dungeons and Fighter universe. Universe involving a bunch of different games and manga going back over a decade.
Yeah.
Games on 360, mobile, a couple of fighting games on the PS4 and 5. So I'm fairly certain that the developer involved in this game, or at least the people involved in this game, are not the same people who made all of them, but they are drawing on a pre-existing wealth of lore and fictional history and stuff in the construction of this game. So it might be a bit premature from just a brief exposure to the demo to say that the game lacks any identifying unique features that we could latch onto.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't even completed the demo, truthfully, so I mean, we're going off a rough early impression here, but
do you remember the Stellar Blade demo? Did you play that? I remember the first few minutes of the Stellar Blade demo vividly.
I remember it being definitely more engaging than this one.
The scene is set well, as your character crashes there on the planet and you see that there's like some giant battle going on between the Natiba and the people who are tasked with defending Earth.
That's
there.
right. Yes,
it was pretty impressive opening scene on the beach there.
That's right. I remember that now. Yeah.
Very vivid, very interesting. And two, there was this immediately identifiable aesthetic. Like all of the characters, though they had a photorealism to them, they looked somewhat like dolls.
Yeah.
They had large eyes. Yeah. Very expressive. At least the human characters. And apart from those human characters, there was people who called themselves humans who were like just robots, these disfigured cyborgs, and this immediate magnetism about everything you were looking at in that game. I think
that's true. It definitely stood out more, and
the way that the character could dress, people showcased a lot of the scanty outfits and stuff like that in the media, but you could also dress her in like sweatsuits. And
there was a lot of options actually.
Yeah, comfortable yellow
cool
clothing.
Ones.
It was
too.
Cool. Yeah,
and it wasn't all just about the sexy stuff. I found a lot of the other outfits were really cool.
I had her dressed in this like yellow sweatsuit.
Yeah, the tracksuit. Yeah,
that's how I would walk around dressed if I was. I mean, I do. So that's just to say there's so much like aesthetic flair to that game.
True. Yeah,
and I too found the world building
wild.
Yeah, man, the world building was very, very cool. My biggest complaint about that game had nothing to do with the fiction or aesthetic. It was about the way they used like standardized mechanics to fluff up each level, you know, making you climb up ladders and go look for switches.
Yeah, it had some weird platforming, little light puzzles and stuff.
They could have done without all of that. If they just made it a super focused Souls-like Wukong was, you know, all you do is fight. You go between bosses, you do some minor rearrangement of the world, but by and large, you don't have to do these silly, like, climb a yellow painted wall.
Yeah, I remember even it got to one point where, like, the power was down somewhere and you had to do something totally unrelated. Not even, I couldn't even do it yet.
They're always trying to get somewhere and they're like, oh, the power's over this door. You gotta go across the place, fight the guys there and turn on the door, right? It's just little filler things like that, you know?
Yeah.
It seems somewhat dishonest way to frame the core loop in terms of the fiction, right? You just send people where they're going, let them participate in the combat, which is the meat of the game, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so, I mean, all this is to say, despite its mechanical deficiencies, which actually consist in its departure from standard Souls-like tropes, you know, it's very recognizable in thematic, fictional, you know, all these tangible aspects. Like when you look at the game and you appreciate them immediately, right?
Yeah.
And you mentioned Lords of the Fallen before, and for me, what was so disappointing about this game was that, unlike Stellar Blade, I do think that the core loop was pretty well refined, right? It was cool. The levels were like labyrinthine, and I didn't really have a problem with exploring them. But what sucked about that game was the total deficit of any interesting lore, background, world building, enemy variety. It just felt like a cardboard cutout of a Souls game. Right?
Yeah, just like a backdrop, just exploring that world with no, I guess, meat and potatoes to latch onto.
We
Nothing like
the other week,
pulling you in, right?
Exactly. About modern graphics as like a flowery, you know, overwritten sentence that expresses nothing. And I think that analogously here, like, there's well-developed Souls-like mechanics in Lords of the Fallen, but what the hell am I doing? Like, why am I playing through this?
Yeah.
I don't care what happens.
There's no urge to do it, right? You're not invested.
The same enemies again. It just doesn't make any sense. In Dark Souls, from beginning to end, you're on this quest from this divine principle to restore, destroy the world.
Yeah.
And, you know, bring the divine dragon's blood back to the West in Sekiro. Something to motivate your character, right?
I hate to say it, and I hope we're wrong, but I fear that we may be dealing with that with this first Berserker.
Yeah, I mean, there was the pretension of something going on here, though. Like, the character in the beginning is some famous general. He's executed or tortured for treason, and now he's inhabited by some netherworld entity that wants to take him on a quest of revenge or something.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be good. I'm not saying it isn't. It's just that my first impression of it, in equal parts as my first impression of Stellar Blade, was strong and memorable aesthetically and thematically. This one
not like so much. No.
Yeah, it felt, you know, it looked beautiful. It's a good Unreal game. It feels like it plays competently, but
you know, I was gonna say maybe to the opposite credit, but Final Fantasy 16, it was the total opposite anyway. Like, it had a strong opening, a demo that, you know, had me craving to get my hands on this game right away, and then it turned out that the game was so anyway, right? So I mean, that could be the opposite scenario.
The opposite, there's no possibility of making a determinative judgment just based on slight exposure to the game,
but the power of having that strong opening is also something that
and a strong, instantly recognizable aesthetic. Whether you're showing a snowy field, a fiery volcano mountain or something, people look at it and be like, yeah, I know what game that is, right?
Exactly what that is.
You know? I think you can do that with most Souls games, for example, right?
Yeah.
You could do that with Stellar Blade for sure. You could probably do that even with Wukong. If you were to look at any of the characters in the game, you know what they're from. Right?
Yeah, fair enough.
They have an idiosyncratic art style.
Very distinct thing, yeah.
And here, like, the enemies, like, you know, we were just looking at the enemies in the opening level. They're just a bunch of generic soldiers, right?
Yeah, they're all like humanoid or like slightly, humanoid beast thing. It's
even
not really...
Think about Elden Ring. You know, the basic soldier enemies. Like, I still remember the kinds of clothes they would wear, distinguishing characteristics between them, the way they flavored those guys to fit into the world where you found them, right? I felt that, like, not, you know, despite disliking some of the bloat in that game, I felt like it was very identifiable. It had a unique and consistent identity, and that's really what carried me through, 90 hours of the main game, and then another God knows how many of the DLC, right?
Yeah, but that game has an incredible enemy variety. I think
it does.
Like, you know,
it's impossible
any
to
other
sustain
games,
in other
practically,
games. Yeah, that's fine. But you know what, though? A game like Slitterhead, also pretty much a Souls-like game in terms of how it plays, it couldn't have as much enemy variety as a game
definitely
like that,
not,
built by a much smaller team. But you know what they did? They made it shorter for that reason.
Yeah, exactly.
It was more compact.
That's right.
And I doubt that we're going to be dealing here with something on the scale of that game.
Which game? sorry,
Slitterhead.
This game will definitely be longer and larger.
And what I fear then
hopefully
is that
it has the enemy variety to accompany that, but it may not, and that will be a problem, right?
And so far we've only mentioned Lords of the Fallen, but there's also games like Nioh and Wu Chang. Is that what it's called? Wulong Fallen Feathers, yes.
We didn't even mention that it's even like a looter. Sorry to interrupt, but
that's another, what I was just going to get at here, right? Like another problem, not just with Lords of the Fallen, with these other games, there's a mechanical element that outstrips any fictional or lore-based justification for the mechanical element, and you're sitting there after 40 hours fighting the same guys you've been fighting for 40 hours. You don't care what number increases you get on your gear. You can hardly tolerate getting to the next boss, even if when sometimes it is, but there's this deflationary, you lose momentum.
Yeah, definitely.
In those contexts, and it's entirely because there's no fictional justification for the mechanics. So for that lack of flavor, right? So I think here we're moving towards a standardization of these Souls-like mechanics. That's what
it seems like that, where someone, anybody with even half an idea can cobble up something and make it, even if it's playable and enjoyable, but not quite the same highs that we're sort of expecting or anticipating.
I remember in 2019, Hellpoint came out.
Yeah,
one of those early kind of indie Souls-likes.
Yeah, and it was a little bit lower budget, right?
It was lower budget. It was made in Unity. It wasn't as impressive to look at or probably even to play as the game we're talking about right now. But what it did have was an incredible world. Expressed very well through the mechanics, right? And I remember it vividly for that reason. You know, and I think it has a cult following now too, actually.
I wouldn't doubt it. Yeah, it had lots of lore bits and stuff. A very mysterious. I think that's part of it too. Is
world, incredible lore. You just feel like you want to know what happens and see the ending.
Intrigues you, right?
An alien thing. You've not seen anything like it before. So I hope that this game has that too. But like we've been saying, my fear is that based on what we've seen, based on the generic nature of the art and even the bosses that appear in the demo, that we're going to be confronted with another like Nioh or Lords of the Fallen type situation,
Yeah, it's very possible.
The standardized elements are frame-based action combat, I think. They are resurrecting at bonfires, losing your souls when you die.
Yep.
I think you can pull these off competently and still have a lot missing in your game due to the fact that you're not expressing anything with them. It's a purely material competence, right?
Definitely possible.
Yeah. Not unlike, how contemporary games have vast technological resources at their disposal but fail to express it.
Yeah, even almost like a service game or something that just puts the focus on, churning out gameplay and this or that, but lacking in, the world building, story, lore, whatever you want to call it, right?
Yeah.
Similar situation kind of going on here.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So I guess there could be a lesson in this about the standardization of the Souls-like genre, and a lesson already taught by games like Lords of the Fallen and to a lesser extent Nioh.
Hopefully we're wrong on this one, but just seems to be the feeling we're getting so far, right?
Yeah. A competent game in a material sense, which is sort of impoverished in terms of its concept.
Yeah.
That would be my first impression, unfortunately, but I very much hope to be wrong. I was looking forward to this game for a while.
Yeah, true. Yeah, we have been talking about it a little bit here and there.
I haven't seen an anime Souls-like since Code Vein.
Code Vein, maybe, yeah. Holy.
Been a long time. But I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
And we can finish the demo and return to it in a week or so.
Yep.
Thank you guys very much for tuning in, and play your Souls-likes.
Yeah.